Hi, this is Steve Michelotti of the Azure Government Engineering team. I'm joined here today by Jason Ingram, Cloud Solution Architect, focused on federal customers. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you very much.
So we are here today to talk about Azure DevOps Server on Azure Government. So why don't we start off, give us a little bit about what Azure DevOps Server is. How is that different than what we think of as regular Azure DevOps, so we understand that distinction there?
So Azure DevOps Server used to be called TFS. Right? So we had TFS Server 2018, and then whenever we rebranded Visual Studio Services to Azure DevOps Services, we rebranded TFS, the server deployment, to Azure DevOps Server. So Azure DevOps Server is the same software that runs in our cloud environment, but you can deploy it onto a VM inside your own environment, customer-owned environment. And DevOps Server is what enables DevOps philosophy for enablement software development, right? So CI/CD pipelines, repositories, commits, the entire workflow for like an agile deployment methodology. And that's what DevOps Server does for us.
Okay, so we our own private instance of Azure DevOps Server in whatever environment we want, our environment as a customer.
That's right, you can put it wherever you want. For today's demo, we're actually deploying it as a VM in Azure Government. Azure Government is different from Azure Commercial, a completely physically and logically separated instance of Azure dedicated to the U.S. regulated industry space, federal customers.
And I can, therefore, since I'm putting it in my own environment, I can set up the network topology however I want.
That's exactly right. I'm so glad you brought that up because most of this session will be focused on secure deployment of Azure DevOps Server, and at the end we're going to bring in like an actual repo and kind of introduce it, sort of like so you can look at this as sort of a how to get started, how to deploy it, and how to get started with your very first repo.
Great. All right. So why don't you give us a high level on what you're going to demo here today?
All right. This is going to be awesome. You guys are going to love this. So before we get started, this is a whiteboard app, and I'm going to draw on this. Yes, I don't actually have very much PowerPoint. The PowerPoint slide you saw was the one and only. So we're going to deploy Azure DevOps Server with Azure SQL. That's the whole point. We want to use PaaS services where we can. So we have Azure DevOps Server, right, down here. This is our DevOps Server box. It has MSI on it. And as part of the deployment pattern.
So MSI.
So managed service identities.
Okay.
So you have an identity. You log in with a username and password. The virtual machine has an identity too. That's what an MSI is. It's a managed service identity.
Great.
Right? As part of this deployment, it's a secure deployment. So this is really important, right? So you have the internet out here. For federal customers, the internet generally is not permitted whenever you're talking about server deployments for internal resources, right? So we're going to demonstrate a template that deploys an image.
So when you say template, you're talking about like an ARM template we can use to deploy resources on Azure.
That's right.
Okay.
An ARM template is infrastructure as code. It
Okay.
is the template that tells the Azure Resource Manager, that's the API that manages Azure, what to do.
Okay, great.
And so when you have a template, you get guaranteed consistency. That's the bottom line, right? You can deploy it the same way over and over again.
Awesome.
Infrastructure as code. If you ever heard that term, that's what a template is. It's the real world implementation. So you have an image, you have a storage account, you have Azure SQL, right? Which is a PaaS service. You don't actually manage it, but you do deploy a server behind the scenes. And you also have Key Vault, right? This entire session is aimed at federal customers. So what we're going to do here is we're going to deploy Azure DevOps Server, except, how I love doing this, is the funnest part of my day. We're going to X out the internet altogether. No internet.
So we're doing this from an environment that is cut off from the internet. And the other takeaway I'm getting here from your diagram is, even though we're installing this on the VM, we can still take advantage of these PaaS services like Azure SQL. I don't have to install SQL on a VM.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
We're using something called VNet service endpoints that provide private IP connectivity to PaaS services, right? So we have two systems that we're primarily. One, so let me go through the workflow so you can kind of see how this works. So you have an image. This image is what the DevOps server is based off of. You deploy the image, and DevOps is pre-installed but not configured at runtime when you first execute the template. The image, when it starts up, logs into Key Vault using the managed service identity and pulls down the credentials necessary to configure Azure SQL.
Nice.
And then the configuration is actually a PowerShell script, right?
Okay, cool.
So it pulls the PowerShell script and any other artifacts, MSIs, executables, install files, whatever you want, out of a storage account, all private, no internet connectivity required. And then it configures Azure SQL, and the system boots up, and now you're bootstrapped, you're ready to rock and roll.
Okay.
So that's what the template does.
Thanks.
And this is a very rough diagram of how it works.
All
The
right.
biggest takeaway there is no internet. This is specifically aimed at federal customers. I work with federal customers all day long, and so this is near and dear to my heart.
All right, so with that, does it make sense to, at this point, flip over to a demo?
Yes, let's do it. So we are going to flip over to the demo, and just so you can kind of see how this works. Like if you wanted to actually execute and do this, very simple. I put all the code out on the internet, which I know we just said no internet, but I'm trying to make this easy on people. I want it to be accessible. So you go to github.com/USRI, US Regulated Industries, github.com, USRI. The only thing out there right now is deploy DevOps Server Azure SQL.
Nice. Okay, so very easy to get started. I know.
Very easy to
Go
get
to this
started.
URL.
And because it's infrastructure as code, and it's all documented out here, you can come out here and look at everything we just talked about, additional resources, nodes, everything, how you can contribution, everything. But we don't have time to talk about all of that today. But to get started quickly, all you do is you hit deploy to Azure Gov. Piece of cake.
So all the things you mentioned when your diagram, the pre-installed image, it's all contained in that
exactly
template.
right.
In just one click here.
The template has references to everything. It deploys exactly what I told it to deploy, right? I can tell it what resource group to deploy. A resource group is just a container for resources. I can tell it what location I want to deploy in. Here's a list of them. If you've never seen Azure Government, here you go, right here. All the regions that we can deploy to. And then you see the actual information, right? SQL Server at name and password, right? You actually define credentials that are passed securely as part of the template deployment. Now, one of the things that's interesting here is you don't actually see an Azure Active Directory admin username, or you only see you don't see the password request. You only see the username, right? The reason is because I'm pulling the password from Key Vault as part of the deployment. So I'm protecting very sensitive data. It's very secure deployment. And the Key Vault is HSM backed, right?
And what we're deploying here is we can go into any VNet we want to, and the template out of the box is that VNet that's cut off from the internet. Is that correct? Or you configure that?
So I should have said this earlier. Thank you for bringing this up.
Okay.
So this assumes you're deploying into a pre-existing environment.
Okay.
It's incredibly rare to deploy into a greenfield environment.
Yeah.
So, but inside the template, in the README file, I actually have a section that teaches you how to deploy the actual infrastructure. If you don't have an infrastructure, you want to deploy an infrastructure really fast, it'll deploy the Active Directory domain, the virtual network, all of it for you right away. But my template only deploys DevOps Server.
Which is more common for customers.
That's way more common. They already have everything else. They're deploying into an existing environment. So I wrote this with that in mind.
Awesome. All right, cool.
And you see virtual network name, resource group, subnet name. These are not creation resources. This is purely reference. Those things already exist.
Awesome.
Okay, one last thing I want to call this out because sharp-eyed people might notice that file URI, this is the PowerShell script that configures SQL on the DevOps server that I referenced earlier. You'll notice there's no secure access signature on the end. The reason is because I actually used the virtual network firewall in conjunction with VNet service endpoints to only enable access from the subnet where DevOps is deployed. So this subnet, AD subnet 1, is the only subnet that can access this storage account, right?
Makes sense.
So it keeps it very simple. You don't have to worry about storage access, signature generation, and all that stuff. You could totally do that if you want to, but you don't need to, right? Still completely secure. So I'm not actually going to hit purchase on here because it takes too long.
Okay.
When I say it takes too long, it takes 5 minutes, 20 seconds, which is still too long for us.
All right, so we'll go into our Martha Stewart quick bake oven here.
That's exactly right.
All right.
So what we're looking at right here is the actual resource group that I already deployed to. And you could see all the things that I drew on the screen earlier. You could see them all listed here. This is a complete deployment. And you could see, if I open this up a little bit, databases were deployed, virtual machines are deployed. I configured SQL administrators, so we had Azure Active Directory integration, storage accounts. Everything that you need is deployed and ready to rock and roll right here. Virtual network rules, that was the rule I talked about with the storage account. And you can come in here and look at all of it. All 100% legit, totally locked and loaded, good to go. So I'm just showing that so you can kind of see what it looks like in action from a deployment standpoint. And now let's actually go into one of the systems. So I deployed two systems. One system is installed but not configured, and one is fully configured. So we're going to step through the UI real quick.
We can see what that experience looks like.
Exactly right.
Cool.
So this is my DevOps server number 1.
Okay.
And
So this is installed but not configured.
installed but not
Got it.
configured.
Okay.
Very easy to tell the difference because whenever you actually launch DevOps, it'll just tell you, hey, you got work to do.
Yeah.
You can see it. Configure installed features. Totally mind-numbing easy. You've already done all the hard work. I can promise you that much.
No, you did the hard work for us by doing the template.
It was fun. I'm a geek about that sort of stuff. I love it. Okay, so we're going to start the wizard, and we're going to try to step through this process. I'm not going to actually let it go and configure it. I have one already fully baked and done, and we'll step over to that.
Okay.
But this is a new server deployment. Licensing, we're going to go ahead and just go with the trial for now. Interestingly enough, because I'm using MSI, the Azure new deployment-Azure shows up. This feature is grayed out unless you have MSI installed and running on that VM.
The
right?
MSI being the managed service identity.
Yeah, the managed service identity. But the template deploys MSI. But if you actually just deployed a VM out of the marketplace and then tried to do this, you wouldn't be able to because it would be grayed out. You must assign a managed identity first.
Oh, cool.
Okay? And you could also see the advanced operation is done too because it's assuming you're going to do Azure, right? So, and we are in fact going to do Azure.
Yep.
So, next, English. Another interesting thing here is the DevOps server actually references the Azure commercial endpoints as the default server SQL instance name. So I'm going to show you the actual real server for our environment, right?
Right, because we're in Azure Government, not Azure
That's
Commercial.
exactly right. We're in Azure Government. Let me see here if I have it up already. Oh, I do. And you can see right here, all I'm looking at is the SQL server that was deployed as part of my script.
Right.
So I do, you can see server name. That's what you want. Just grab that guy.
So we see the US GovCloud API.net.
That's right, usgovcloud.api.net. That's where we want to deploy. So you just come in here, and again, you don't actually have to provide any credentials. The reason is because the system is providing them itself.
Through the managed identity.
Through managed identity, that's right. Let's talk about that for one brief second.
Okay.
So for Azure Active Directory integration to work, you must have a Azure Active Directory user assigned as an admin to Azure SQL, right?
Okay.
That's the only way the SQL scripts that configure Azure SQL will function correctly. So if you go look at my template, you'll see information all about it in there. About
in the README file.
It's all in there. So just keep that. It's a gotcha. It will get you if you're not careful about it. So now back to this. So I put the SQL Server instance name in. It uses MSI naturally. So it recognizes MSI as assigned to the system. It grabs the credentials associated with MSI, it logs into Azure SQL, and tests connectivity. Boom.
Even more secure because we're not shuffling
right.
passwords around everywhere.
Nobody knows the password. Nobody's even seen it. We don't have a clue, right? It's just done. We are going to accept defaults, but in a more enterprise environment, you probably would consider using domain user accounts and that kind of stuff. But we're doing a very simple deployment as a part of our getting started today. Again, we're going to accept defaults. If you wanted to, if you had SSL, obviously you probably wouldn't access this over port 80 in a production environment. You would install your own certificate and handle a binding. For Azure Search, this is if you have work items, you need to actually be able to search. And we're going to enable basic authentication, which the search service actually resides on the system. So this is going to work out pretty well for us.
But overall, I mean, this is just a pretty simple wizard-based next
That's
experience.
exactly right. There's nothing to it, right? The hard work has already been done.
Yep.
Now, one thing you're going to see right here, it's going to do verification checks. And when it does, the verification checks are going to come out and say, hey, Jason, you forgot something. And I did, in fact, forget something. When I built my base image, I forgot to include the Java runtime environment.
Okay.
So it's actually going to tell me about that. So in reality, what I would do is I would either create, you could see it right here, right? It just came up, Java 8 required, right? But in reality, what I would do is I would take the MSI for that Java installer and put it in my storage account, go through whatever process I need to from an organization
Now,
standpoint.
that time when you said MSI, you meant the installer.
The
not
installer.
service
Oh
identity.
my gosh, that's so confusing, right? Yes, I meant the installer.
Yeah.
You take the installer, you put it in the storage account, and then you just pull it down just like you would your PowerShell script and either install it or you put it into your base image.
Okay.
The DevOps Server offline installer is about 1 gig, and so I baked it into the image versus trying to pull it down during deployment time because it's a big file, right?
Yep.
But it works just the same. If I click accept here, it will go ahead and attempt to install and configure Java, and it'll be successful. It'll work. It'll do a good job.
Okay. Cool.
But instead of configure, we're going to flip over to the actually already completed environment, right? So I'm going to minimize this guy, and we're going to step right over here to our already deployed environment. And if I fire up DevOps Server here, you'll actually be able to see that it already is fully configured.
Right, so it's not giving the message that we saw last time, which is you need to have some work to do, you need to configure. Now we can see it's ready to go.
That's right. It is completely done, ready to rock and roll. And you can see Azure DevOps 2019 Update 1. This is our very latest data tier database US Gov Cloud.
Okay.
Right? Now, the interesting thing about this is you don't deploy DevOps for fun to deploy it. You deploy it to actually utilize it, right? You actually want to do something with it. So that's where it actually gets to be kind of fun. So now we have it deployed. It's actually up and running. I'm a software developer. I want to do some work, right? So I have a project, right? And just because we're working on DevOps today, we're going to call our project Deploy DevOps.
Okay, creative name.
Creative
like
name.
A software engineer, we don't have name stuff.
That is so right. So right. And we have options here. Version control, almost everybody's going to choose Git. Work item process, if your deployment methodology or development methodology is Agile, use Agile. If it's Scrum, use Scrum. I'm going to stick with Basic, and just has to do with how we measure work item and sprints and those kinds of things. So we're going to create project. And it's going to go out and actually create this project for us. And now that we have a project, the project is our actual solution, something we want to deploy or create or iterate on. So the first thing you need for any project is source files, right? Something you could actually work on.
And what's interesting here is you're already, just based on what we see on your browser here, we're in the experience that we would expect from if we were using Azure DevOps, the SaaS offering. But now here we're using it in our own environment that is cut off from the internet.
That is exactly right. Exactly
Getting
right.
that same nice user experience.
So if you were in Azure DevOps, our service, it would look exactly the same.
Yep.
It would be very hard to tell the difference. It's super close. So you could think of it like a stair step, right? We make improvements in the cloud, it gets released as an update to on-prem.
Right.
So as long as you have a refresh cycle for deploying updates, you will generally stay within shouting distance of our actual cloud service.
Yeah, and just to be super precise, even though you use the term on-prem, you're basically meaning it in the context of our controlled install on Azure Government.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's still in the cloud.
Yeah.
When I say on-prem,
Theoretically, you could put it on-prem.
Totally doable. When I say on-prem, what I mean is infrastructure as a service, like virtual machines is what I'm thinking about in my head. Cool. So now that we have this, first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to import a registry. Well, what registry should we import? Well, we actually have one out here already, right? It's already here. GitHub.com, USRI.
This is getting very meta here. We're importing the repository that created us.
I know, right? But this is totally true. Every software developer in the world will get this. No matter how good you do it, there's always room for improvement, right? There is room for improvement in my template. And there is someone out there right now who can make those improvements. So as an organization, if you're like, that's a decent start, but there are things that would be more relevant to our organization, our security controls, our CISOs, we need to make some improvements on it. Well, guess what? That's what DevOps is for. Take the infrastructure as code. I'm going to click import, and it's going to pull that entire environment into our Azure DevOps server. So now we have source files. Our internal developers can make code commits against this to improve it, to make it better. And willingly, go ahead.
And so question, so in order to do the import you just did, this machine was able to reach out to the internet.
Oh, that's correct. So I did do it that way, but typically for a commit to an on-prem server, what you would do is a developer would follow the same lifecycle as like the OpenJDK installation. They would pull it down to a local laptop or develop it on their local laptop and then do a push.
Yeah.
But I don't actually
We took a liberty for demo purposes, but you could absolutely cut this off completely from the internet.
Totally. The whole point is that the architecture I utilize is based on no internet access.
Yes.
The architecture works if the DevOps server does not have any access to the internet. Good to go. Typically, I would use a laptop and do a push to the system from inside.
Yeah.
But I don't have those laptops available, so I'm just doing it this way. But you could see here, config SQL, right? This is the SQL script downloaded from the storage account that actually does all the work. And you could see in here, this invoke web request. This is me calling out to get the managed service identity. This is me talking to my Azure Key Vault, vault.usgovcloud.net. And this is me down here actually configuring SQL according to our user documentation for Azure DevOps Server deployments. You can come here and look at all of it. The master update, here is the actual SQL queries I'm running against all of it to make it all work.
Basically all the steps that we saw being invoked at the beginning of the demo.
You nailed it. You nailed it.
Cool.
And of course, the infrastructure is code that's hosted here. And from here, what you would normally do, if you were building a CI/CD pipeline, is you would go to Azure Pipelines. And from here, you do Azure Build Pipelines and Azure Release Pipelines. Build to do testing, to make sure everything's legit, and then release to actually put it out there to work with.
Yeah, so at this point, everything's up and running. We can configure it however we want. Like you said, CI/CD pipelines, builds, Kanban boards, whatever the case may be.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly right. Work item tracking, all of it, all together. We call it epics and stories. You define an epic, you attach work items, and then you have sprints to fulfill those visions, whatever those features are for your software.
Okay, cool. So just to close, I guess the question is, how does someone get started with this? I have a feeling what your answer is going to be because you showed us that GitHub repo. Just give us a couple words about that to close out here.
Okay, so to get started, if you want to just kick the tires, here's what I recommend. One of my coworkers wrote this, Azure AD Hybrid Deployment Templates. This will deploy the necessary infrastructure, Azure Active Directory. It'll deploy Active Directory domains. It'll deploy an Active Directory domain controller. It'll create a virtual network. Deploy that in your test environment, and then you can use this template to deploy DevOps Server into that environment. And of course, you can use this template to deploy into a test environment or into a production environment, whatever works best for you. But that's the easiest way to get started. One thing I'll call out, just so you're aware of it, when you do the deployment, if you actually try to tackle it, be sure that you don't forget to enable VNet service endpoints on your actual virtual networks. If you don't, then the connectivity won't work when you do the deployment.
Okay.
Just a pro tip.
So anyone can access this, they can fork it, they can submit
exactly
PRs, whatever the case may be.
They can do whatever they want. I own this repository, so if someone does make an improvement, I would love it so much if someone would make an improvement and then submit a pull request and get it merged back in so we can make it better for everyone.
Awesome. Okay, great.
All right.
Well, thanks for talking to us today about Azure DevOps Server. This has been Steve Michelotti with Jason Ingram talking about Azure DevOps Server on Azure Government. Thanks for watching.